好，分兩排好啊，我企後邊啦。
唔使兩排啦，而家一眼睇晒。喂，企埋啲啊，梁繼昌，企埋少少。
仲有。
佢
梁星
嚟咗未？未啊！
爭啊，謝偉俊同阿
睇我最靚仔嗰個成年埋先啦嚇。
最靚仔咪呢度咯。
唔係，阿梁星
唔夠歪啊！
未齊人係嘛？未齊人
爭兩個
係嘛？
停一停好嘛，停一好嘛，唔好意思，
好。
因為我哋2點半先開始。
坐低啦。
咁你點鬧啊？我要翻去聽翻嚟先。
你想聽啲嘢嘅咩？
我聽㗎，我最中意聽。我唔中意聽讚美嘅説話，
係嘛？
因為點解咧？我應該想聽你邊個講完啊？Paul 邊個講完咧？Andrew 兩個我要焗上去Government House，因為今日有 Hong Kong U 嘅 Council 食飯。I thought, oh my God, it's going to be. 好，企密少少好嘛？
企密少少好。
不過佢喺左邊嘅，向左走，向左走。
中間係嘛？
斜地靚啲可能張相。
搞掂未
？OK。
由佢嚟得啦，電視機得未？電視機得未？搞掂啦。
OK。
得啦嘛 ？OK， 咁得咯。
Welcome to the press conference of the Public Accounts Committee. First, the chairman will say a few words. Thank you, friends of the media, for coming to the press briefing on the PAC report number 63. We have selected 4 chapters for holding hearings. In the report that we tabled today, it includes only 3 chapters. There is still 1 chapter. Maybe in the next month or so, we'll be able to complete the report on Chapter 4, on the air traffic system of the Civil Aviation Department. This report covers 3 chapters, Chapter 1, 2, and 3. For Chapters 1 and 2, they have to do with services for the elderly. Mr. Alan Leung was the lead member at those hearings. The 3rd chapter, Chapter 3, is on the new Civil Aviation Department headquarters. Mr. Kenneth Leung was the lead member. Now, before we invite questions from you, can I suggest that perhaps we will first spend 15 minutes on questions on chapters 1 and 2, that is long-term care services and health services for the elderly. And then we will allow more time on Chapter 3, because I know you would have questions on Chapter 3, which is on the CAD headquarters, because the tone was much more severe, or rather there was a lot more coverage on Chapter 3, and it's important that for chapters 1 and 2, we want the administration to know how to use its resources so they could provide better services to the elderly and meet their needs. Anyway, I won't say too much because already this morning I gave a report at the council meeting. Now I will allow more time for questions for the first 15 minutes, or if you want longer, it's fine. But perhaps for the first of all, we will deal with chapters 1 and 2. Questions, please, on chapters 1 and 2, services for the elderly. Alan? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For chapters 1 and 2, here the target is our senior citizens. One chapter is on long-term care services for the elderly. The other is on health services for the elderly. As you know, in Hong Kong, we have a rapidly aging population. By 2030, there will be one person aged 65 or above in every 4 persons. And each year we spend much public funds on long-term care and health services for the elderly. From the point of view of value for money, in accordance with the audit report, the Public Accounts Committee conducted a detailed examination on the value for money study, whether they were able to make good use of the resources and whether they were able to further enhance their services. Now, in Hong Kong, we have ample resources, but then the elderly people are facing tough challenges, and that should not be the case. You know, for Chinese, we worry most that the elderly couldn't live with dignity. In 2013 to 14, there were 5,700 elderly persons who waited for so long for subsidized home places. They actually didn't make it. They went to paradise eventually, and that we find that unacceptable. We've expressed grave concern about that, and we feel deep regret and sadness for these senior citizens. But unfortunately, from what we learned from Mr. Matthew Cheung, the Secretary for Labour and Welfare, what he said couldn't put our mind at ease, and he couldn't instill confidence in us that for the elderly who have made so much contribution to Hong Kong, that they would have reliable care in their twilight years. No, we can't get that assurance. Now, we pointed out a point because the government keeps saying there should be aging in place. And having heard all the evidence at our hearings, the committee is certain that this aging in place policy is just an excuse for the administration to not to provide sufficient care places for the elderly. Now, whenever we say there are not enough care home places, the government would say, well, because we want to promote aging in place. But if you look at this so-called aging in place, well, I'm sure you've read the audit report and now the PAC report. You know that the government is just paying lip service to that policy. For the elderly who age in place, they are not given sufficient support at all. For the carers, they are not giving enough support either, so they could take care of the elderly. The carers sometimes feel rather helpless, so the government's not taking care of the carers either. And that's a point we made in the report in particular. On Chapter 2, Health Services for the Elderly, we are concerned that sometimes it took 9 years for the first health assessment, and that's really unacceptable. Why is that the case? Because we're saying that we should treat illnesses early, so therefore the first health assessments must be offered at an opportune time, and then there could be proper follow-up. And that might actually lessen the burden on the whole healthcare system. But then here, in terms of using resources, the government has not been efficient. And then for the Department of Health, in terms of the operation of some of the elderly health centers, we asked the department to conduct a comprehensive review. For instance, the government should also consider, again, setting up the geriatrics specialty. Now, during the public hearing, the representatives of the Department of Health and the Food and Health Bureau i.e. officials with experience in geriatrics service, they said at the hearing that perhaps it's timely for us to review whether we should design something with the elderly at heart. Now, we had a geriatrics specialty some 20 years ago, but we no longer have it. And now we're facing a rapidly aging population. Perhaps there is need to conduct a comprehensive review and see if there is need to again set up the geriatric specialty. And such evidence was put on record. So perhaps I'll stop here by way of introduction. Does other members wish to speak? If not, then 15 minutes for questions on chapters 1 and 2, services for the elderly. Questions, please. You mean the Civil Exchange Department is the main character here? Well, it's important that we include chapters 1 and 2 in our report because, as Mr. Alan Leung just pointed out, there are now 14% of our population who are elderly persons. And in 2013, there are some 800,000 elderly persons. By 2021, there will be 2.56 million elderly persons in our population. The 18 elderly health centers mentioned just now, well, that number hasn't gone up in the past decade, but then the elderly population has been growing. So that's why in Wan Chai and Sam Shui Po, if elderly persons want first health assessment, they have to wait for 9 years. On average, in other districts, the waiting time is 32 months or 36 months. Well, you're young people, you don't understand it. You don't understand the problems that the elderly face because their health is important. Because as Mr. Leung just explained, if they knew sooner there were problems with their health, it could save us a lot in hospitalization costs because there could be early treatment. But when we spend a lot of money on public hospitals, at the same time, we could not even offer elderly persons a first health assessment that leads to a whole spectrum of problems. So that's why we have put these chapters in the report. We want to tell the Chief Executive and the administration that the elderly has made huge contribution to Hong Kong. We must not overlook their needs. So young people, do you have questions on the elderly, please?
Well,
you should ask a question on behalf of the elderly people. Imagine that you were an elderly person and you had to wait for 9 years before you get your first time health assessment. I think it's even a bigger problem than the CAD saga. Standard, Kenneth Lau. You said that you will follow up with a report on the CAD as Alan said, there is a suggestion of re-establishing the geriatrics specialty. So will the PAC follow up with the FHB and ask for a follow-up report on the overall direction? That is, whether the geriatric specialty will be re-established. Perhaps we can come up with a figure on the savings to be made in terms of medical cost, and also as far as value of money for money is concerned, how can public money help the elderly people? With regard to the elderly people and also the geriatric specialty, Mr. Alan Leung raised that question. Perhaps I'll defer to him to take that question. All of us know the PAC's work is that we will not end our work after we've published the report. Every time we would ask the Director of Audit to follow up on what the government has done in response to our report. So we would, year after year, ask the government departments to follow up via the Director of Audit. When we compiled the report, we looked at the election manifesto of C.Y. Leung, and at that time he was branding himself as the savior of the grassroots, and he was undertaking to provide homes for the elderly. Now, in 2013-14, 5,700 people went to Paradise before they got a place in the RCHE. So, is it in line with what he promised? Well, to answer you, we would be following up duly. There are 31,000 elderly on the waiting list for a subsidized RCHE place. But there are only 26,000 places of subsidized RCHE places. A lot of young people said that they couldn't own their homes. But what the elderly are asking is merely that in their twilight years, they can live with dignity, comfortably. Raymond Wong is very clear about the situation. He can supplement later. In 2013, 5,700 elderly passed away. And they were waiting for subsidized services. What kind of society is this? This is an affluent society. Should we reflect on ourselves? Well, last year is not particularly unique. Well, actually, the year before, some 1,000 elderly people passed away before getting an RCHE place. This is something should be of great concern to us. And elderly people contribute to the society in their lives. And it seems that people are not very concerned about services for them. So that's why we wanted to compile a report on this issue, which is of great concern, which should be of great concern to the society. Long-term care service. Demand outstrips supply. In the past year, 5,700 people passed away when they're waiting for a place. That's why Alan Leung said it's easier to go to heaven than getting into an RCHE. So we are very unhappy with the government's work on this part. And also on the health services for the elderly. You have to wait for 9 years before you get the first-time assessment. You would already have died from cancer before you get your first assessment. So this is, the government has to be blamed. So we think that in chapters 1 and 2, we would like to take a more constructive approach, try to urge them to do a better job, and we try not to condemn them too much. Well, if you ask for my personal stance, I would definitely condemn the government. But then, this is not the view of the PAC. I'm sure that you are all concerned about Chapter 3 on the CAD headquarters, and it seems that you are not very interested in chapters 1 and 2, but actually the issues raised are of a serious nature too. So the young reporters here, please also show concern to the elderly people. They are part of the society. Now, if you don't have any further questions, then we will go to the topics of your interest, i.e. Chapter 3. Mr. Kenneth Leung.
Can you just summarize? Can you summarize in English, how bad the situation is with regard to elderly, and what are you recommending should be done?
I'll leave it to my lead member to comment on this. Okay.
The Hong Kong population is rapidly aging. By 2031, 1 in 4 in Hong Kong would have reached the age of 65. Every year, we spend a lot of money from the public coffer to support the services provided to our aged population. But it has been the finding of the Public Accounts Committee, based on the audit report, that the services provided have been far from satisfactory. For example, we have seen in the audit report that in the year 2013 to 2014, 5,700 old people who are in the queue for admission to subsidized residential places in homes for the aged died before they could be admitted. This is a situation that we find to be very sad, and in a society as affluent as Hong Kong, we are mistreating our old people who certainly had contributed a lot to the development of Hong Kong and what has become of Hong Kong we are seeing today. So we owe them for their contribution, and we hope that by this PAC report we could draw sufficient attention on the part of the administration to this unbearable situation. And as for the other chapter that deals with the medical care that we have been providing for our elderly people, we have also found totally unacceptable a situation that, for example, if you want to go to the clinics in the districts for a first-time medical checkup, in 2 of the 18 districts, you would have to wait for more than 9 years. And that is totally unacceptable. And we certainly see that there is an immediate need for improvements to be made on those scores. Thank you.
All right.
Well, if you don't have any further questions, then we'll go to Chapter 3.
Mr. Kenneth Leung was the lead member in our examination of the issue. Mr. Kenneth Leung first will say a few words before we invite questions. Now, Chapter 3 is on the new Civil Aviation Department headquarters. Overall, there's not been any cost overrun for this project. But then in our hearings and in the evidence we collected, it was shown that several government departments, including the CAD and the Architectural Services Department, as well as the Transport and Housing Bureau. Now, for these 3 units, in terms of the floor area of the new CAD headquarters and the facilities provided, they have an unshakable responsibilities in relation to this project. Now, there are 2 problems that we have to point out. Under the Basic Law, the Legislative Council has the constitutional duty to monitor the spending of the government. And then the government has rules and regulations in exercising control over what can be built or not built in a building. Now, for 1,500 square meters of the new CAD headquarters, originally it's just a reserve site. That means it's just a vacant site reserved. But then at the end, this 1,500 square meters of reserved land became part of the CAD building, and that is totally unacceptable. That's why in our discussion we considered severe wordings to condemn the CAD and the ASD. And then the Transport and Housing Bureau is the policy bureau of the CAD. It has the duty to monitor and control the spending of departments. And apart from that, there are other facilities like the shower room of the director, the recreation room. They are not in line with the schedule of accommodation originally proposed. Perhaps that's by way of brief introduction. We welcome questions now. Now, we are here, all of us here could answer questions, not just Mr. Kenneth Leung, who could take your questions, because all the members were involved in the public hearing. So if you have any questions for any particular member, please feel free to put them. I'm from cable TV. You use the term deplore to condemn the Director of Civil Aviation. So is that a severe term? And would you like the administration to discipline him in any way? Now, the Public Accounts Committee is very careful in our choice of words. At public hearings, we allow ample opportunities for questions to be answered. And then in our closed-door deliberations, we went over this issue time and time again. Now, we use the term deplore. There was one report on Timothy Tong. We also used the term deplore. So Timothy Tong and the Director of Civil Aviation, how could they be compared? Well, but now here we're not just talking about extra toilet or shower room or space for dancing. The PAC plays an important role. As Mr. Kenneth Leung pointed out, we have a constitutional duty. There are rules to follow as they come to the Legislative Council to seek funding support. First, they have to go to the relevant panel, and then the Public Works Subcommittee, and then the Finance Committee. Every time the paper submitted must state clearly, say, for the $1 billion they're asking for, what it is for. They have to list out all the items, say, from item 1 to 10. But of course, between administration and the legislature is all a matter of trust, because we're not the experts. We just have to take their words for it. But then when they go back, and do something else, and now we have studied very carefully the documents that they submitted to the Legislative Council. Now, if they go beyond the scope approved, let's say they have given a list of 10 or 20 items, if they go beyond that list, if they want to add more items, have they come back to LegCo to tell us? Because that's where our duty lies. Our duty is to monitor government departments. At many public hearings, they were never able to offer an explanation on that. Now, we went through all past papers submitted to LegCo. We never found anything about them coming back. And then for the heads of the department, for heads of departments or heads of policy bureau, there are specific rules as to who are entitled to private shower facilities or other treatments. Now, there's a breach of established government rules here. It seems that CAD operates as an independent kingdom. They do whatever they want as if they're not bound by any rules. And it's also a breach of trust in the relations between the executive and the legislature. It seems that they have deceived us or hidden things from us. So we had to consider, therefore, what term to use. The word deplore is a severe term. And Well, this morning I explained what we did in the report and what we expect the administration to do. We think the administration ought to follow up on this. Now, we have now found out the facts, and we have formed our judgment. We used the term deplore to condemn the director. And then the administration will have to come back and tell us what they're going to do as follow-up. Now, is there any breach of conduct here? Because he's a civil servant, is it the case that he has not observed the code of civil servants? If that's the case, what would the administration do? It's not just about being accountable to the electrical, but to the entire community. I'm from Commercial Radio. On the Director of Civil Aviation, you use the term deplore. Is this already the most severe terms in condemning anyone? Perhaps one question at a time, please. In the PAC has a set term of glossaries, and this is a unanimous decision in our choice of words. Now, in the Timothy Tong's report, we also use the term deplore. So in terms of severity, is that after we have examined the evidence, after we've heard the witnesses' evidence, we find that in the construction of the CAD headquarters, there's certainly a breach of the rules and regulations. Yes. Now, you said you deplore the Director of Civil Aviation of deliberately not performing his duties. On the construction of a new CAD, in terms of the submission of information or in terms of making decisions on facilities, is there a breach of the relevant civil service code, or how is it to be handled? Well, whether there's a breach of the relevant civil service code is not a matter for the PAC. Our duty is just to point out the conduct of the director, what he's done, that is. So that's the terms of reference for the PAC. Now, at the public hearing, Professor Anthony Cheung said that he would follow up on the case. If there is any breach of the Civil Service Code, there are established procedures to follow by the administration. So that's not our job. Our job is to point out the facts that we identified from the our examination of the case. So we look at this issue from the point of view of value for money. I wonder if other members wish to speak as well.
Mr. Alin Lang, let me say a few words more. The PAC finds a lot of irregularities in the Director General of CA building the CAD headquarters. So we use the word deplore. There are two main aspects. When we talk about the relationship between the LegCo and the ExCo, if the papers presented by the ExCo are not accurate and complete, then there is no way that there is a good relationship between the two. Second, there are internal guidelines within the executive arm. There is the working of the Property Vetting Committee, and also there is the Financial Circular number 9/90. These are the internal mechanisms adopted by the executive arm in controlling the cost of works and public projects. For the new CAD headquarters and its construction, the internal guidelines are not properly adhered to, and also not accurate information is provided to the LegCo. So there are wrongdoings on those two aspects, and the proper arrangement between the ExCo and LegCo has been the administrative arm has been undermined. So that's why we have dealt with the matter in a most serious manner, severe manner. The chairman was has been clear. The PAC will hold open hearings based on the Audit Commission's report, and we will come up with recommendations. And the Audit Commission and also government will follow up on our recommendations. We may also, as members, have our own personal stance, and our views may not represent that of the PACs. In the open hearing, I said to myself that if this happens in another place, all these government officials would already have been asked to step down. I think the director of RHSD, the secretary for Transport and Housing, and also the director general of Civil Aviation should step down. Well, as mentioned, there are a lot of guidelines and in place, but then these have all been breached. Well, as LegCo members, we do have our own stance, but then as a whole, PAC, this is what we have come up with. If you ask for my personal opinion, I can certainly give you my answer or my view. Next. Which newspaper? Ming Pao? Okay, Ming Pao. You said you would deplore the Director General of Civil Aviation of willfully neglecting his responsibilities in that he hasn't provided complete, accurate, and non-misleading information. Does it mean that he has provided misleading information to you with regard to the point about 5,500 square meters of building construction? The government has different regulations on buildings. One is the schedule of accommodation, and that should be something approved by the Property Vetting Committee, PVC. So the 1,500 square meters should be a future provision and should not be included within the construction area of the headquarters. But then when the Director General of Civil Aviation gives the employer's requirements to the RHSD, he has included this 1,500 square meters into the building. According to the government's internal guidelines, well, it's only when the two documents are consistent should you be able to build this extra provision. So there are mistakes made, and two government officials, the Director General of Civil Aviation and also the Chairman of the PVC, i.e. the Director of RHSD, should be held responsible. The two documents should be consistent. That's number one. Number two, when they submit documents to the Economic Development Panel, the PWSC, and also the FC, seeking approval for the construction cost of the CAD headquarters. The 1,500 square meters is indicated as a future provision and not part of the building. But it's, of course, altogether a different story when the headquarters was ultimately built. When a department submits a proposal seeking funding, the paper should be accurate, complete, and not misleading. This is a principle that we propose. And we would also like to leverage on this incident so that for whatever funding proposals are put by the government, they should abide by that principle. Well, of course, the PAC's work is really looking back, retrospective, and looking at whether expenditures expended was value for money. But at the same time, the PAC has the duty to ensure that government policy is implemented smoothly and that the LegCo and the administrative works under certain regulations and rules. Most of the departments abide by that principle. But then this is an exceptional case, and we identified it. And we're afraid that if we don't make public this incident, the situation will only get worse. So we have to be forward-looking. Most departments have abided by their principle, and if we let go of this particular department, then it will not be fair. Any other question? Oriental Daily. Yes, Oriental Daily. I would like to ask something about more about the wording. Condemns. Strongly condemns is a word used on Timothy Tong. And this time around, Director General of Civil Division, you said willfully neglected his responsibility, deliberately overriding certain rules. So he's actually blatantly deceiving the government. Why haven't you used the word strongly condemn? And also, as members of the PAC or as LegCo members, what kind of follow-up measures do you think the government should take? You said that you would ask the Director General of Civil Aviation to submit a report. Would there be any internal disciplinary action? We used the word deplore. Well, this is a very severe term, well, if not the most severe, at least very severe, I would say. Well, condemn is not as severe as deplore, in our view. And we can't find another word which can better speak our mind to show our disappointment, great disappointment towards the incident. We don't want to convey any wrong message here. We have been very careful in our wording. We've deliberated at length in the choice of our words. Kenneth, yes, let me add. Oriental Daily asked, in Timothy Tong's report, we used the word strongly condemn. I don't think there is a word that, well, we used condemn and deplore, same here. Well, in the glossary of PAC, well, these are the most severe wordings. Of course, if more serious incidents happen in the future, we can't rule out even more severe terms. But as of to date, these are the most severe words that we have used. Since I have taken up office in the PAC, I haven't seen a situation like that. This is a very serious incident. I haven't seen anything like that before. Mr. Ng Lang Sing, you attach a lot of importance to the wording that's used this time as a member of PAC. And I can say that we deliberated at length on the wordings. And we don't want to see another department deviating from the prescribed or approved standards in terms of the buildings. So this is what you're concerned about. And that is why we are not tackling the issue merely from the point of value for money. Perhaps it's good to have a building this 1,500 square meters, but as long as it has not been approved, then this is something not acceptable. If any government department undermines the mechanism of using public money, then that should not be accepted. Now, as regards how we should treat the individual public officer as agreed with Mr. Raymond Wong in saying that we would point out the mistake and we would not go into the detail on how to deal with the civil servant concerned. So this is what I want to add.
The term deplore. There was careful deliberations at the committee, and it's a unanimous decision in deciding to use this term. Now, the new headquarters built do not agree with the original approved scope, and certainly not in line with the scope spelled out in the papers they submitted to the LegCo. Now and also the government has internal mechanism on the construction of buildings, and it seems that they have totally disregarded the mechanism. I say that because I can give you an example. For example, at the CAD headquarters, there was a proposal to construct a restroom for the accident investigators. The government property agency only approved a common restroom, but when they actually built the building, at the end there were 6 restrooms built. So there's an established mechanism, but they just didn't follow it. They bypassed or circumvented all the rules and regulations. They circumvented the monitoring mechanism of LegCo, and that's something we consider to be utterly disappointing. Deputy Chairman. Well, the commercial radio just asked whether within our terms, deplore is the strongest term. Well, of course, there is no limitation of what terms we use within our terms of reference. But then, as a colleague pointed out, we have a list of glossaries on the terms we could use in English and Chinese. But what is important is that we find the right term for the case in question. Now, in English, the term is deplorable, which is stronger than condemn. But that's just to reflect the sentiments of members, including mine. And from my recollection, another case as serious is the Timmy Tong's case, so you could therefore judge for yourself how serious this case is. But perhaps in future there's another case which is even more serious or as serious, we might also use the same term. But perhaps I should say that for this term of the Public Accounts Committee, I think we have been using stronger terms, slightly stronger terms than before. Perhaps because there have been more cases of maladministration, and that's why there's a rising trend of the use of stronger terms. But anyway, we believe this is a very strong term. I've been a PC member for many years. This year, I don't think we have been using stronger terms, but rather for the reports submitted to us, the cases are rather serious. As I said, like this case, I've never seen this in over a decade. It's a deliberate act of hiding things from LegCo. But of course, if they want to vary the scope of the project, they just need to go through the established mechanism first internally and then come to LegCo. Maybe they can just go to the reference panel and then go back to the Public Works Subcommittee and the Finance Committee. The mechanism is there, but they just did not follow this mechanism. So that's why it's a deliberate act. And eventually we saw these problems. So we take this whole case very seriously. Because procedures are important. If there are no procedures to follow, if there are no rules to follow in any place, then there cannot be proper governance. Now the PAC looks at money, value for money, It's not just about how much money is spent, whether it's spent properly, but at the same time, value for money study involves the question of governance. Here we're talking about governance of several departments. For example, the Architectural Services Department. It had the duty to monitor the construction of the headquarters project. And then the Secretary for Transport and Housing. He should come to this LegCo and give us papers. They were aware of this issue, but they didn't tell us. So that's an important question of governance that's been brought out by this case. And that's what we want to pinpoint.
Is this the worst case of misuse of public funds that the PAC has come across?
I won't say the worst cases. This is a very severe case. And I think there's no worse than worse. I don't know. In future, there might be even cases that are even worse than this one. So it's relative. But so far, over my years as a PEC member, I have very seldom experienced a case like this that blatantly ignore rules and regulation of the government civil service. 或者 Kenneth 你想答
Kenneth?
Chairman, it is a very, very severe case. And of course, I couldn't say whether this is the worst case. But so far, of course, I've been a member of the PAC for only 2.5 years. And of course, this is the most serious case of blatant violation of government's rules and regulation by a department head, by a director. And that's the reason why we have chosen the wording and language in the report.
Norman Lowe may be subjected to a disciplinary hearing, and if he is, and he's found at fault, what kind of punishment do you think he should be given?
It's not for us as members to comment. He is a civil servant, and there are regulations that governs the behavior of civil servants. As legislators, we never like to interfere into the executive branch work. Thank you.
Are you hoping that he may be asked
I
to
never,
step down, forced to retire?
I don't hope for anything. I only tell the truth of what has happened.
Do you think the whole system needs to be tightened up to prevent similar incidents?
In fact, possibly this is a rare case of violation of government's works, but we actually work according to the report submitted to the PAC, and we only from there we search for the truth. We then look and finding of the facts, and we also give opportunity for the witnesses to tell us their sides of the story, and then we come to a conclusion. Mm-hmm. And our job is to look into all those cases presented to us by the Director of Audit. Okay, thank you. 多謝。邊位?
Yes, RTHK. Compared to the Timothy Tong's report recommendation, the last bit of the report. Now, in that report, Mr. Timothy Tong was named, but in this report, Mr. Norman Lowe was not named. Is there still a difference between the two cases? Which head of department do you think was more negligent or had to shoulder more responsibilities? Well, those are two different cases of entirely different nature. For the CAD case, we're talking about failure to comply with established rules of the government. That's the first question. Second question is that for documents submitted to the Legislative Council for our scrutiny, there was certainly no mention of this 1,500 square meters of built structure. So both issues have to do with the quality of governance. Now, whether we name an official or not, you said you could see we used the term Director General of Civil Aviation is about a post. So I don't think we should compare the two reports, really. It's not meaningful to do the comparison. If I may just add, say for the Timothy Tong's case, now he drank hard liquor. then I couldn't say the commissioner of ICAC drank hard liquor, right? Because it's that individual who drank the hard liquor. That's why we had to say Timothy Tong had hard liquor. But then here is the Director General of Civil Aviation. He did this not for himself, well, but perhaps for himself. But anyway, he did so as the Director General of Civil Aviation. So that's why we are specific, and we considered very carefully how to put it. Or for example, Timothy Tong asked someone to go and buy fish balls, and that has nothing to do with his post. But then for this 15,000 square feet of extra space built, or for the toilets built, the future Director General could also use that shower facilities, but of course he's not using it now. He's closed off that area. So we have to look at it from that angle. With every case, we have to be very specific, because it may have an impact on the reputation of the individuals concerned. That's why we're very careful in our choice of words. We don't want to arrive at wrongful conclusions.
Chairman, you said that this is a very, very serious case so far since you've joined the PAC. Since 2000, is this the first or the only time that you use the word deplore? No, it's the second time for the current term. I can't remember exactly when we did use that term before, apart from Timothy Tong's case. I can't remember whether we used that term too in Harbourfest. Well, possibly not. That was also a serious violation. Is this the worst case that you've ever seen? Or after Tong, I think they should not have done such things. So we want to be forward-looking, and we want to other government departments to learn from the incidents, hence the use of the wordings.
Word. So what is so deplorable about the Director General's actions, and how has the administration's regulations of checks and balances been undermined in this case?
Kenneth, you like to answer that?
I think there are already set rules and procedures and guidelines to guide how a government department should design and build a building. And these rules and procedures are very clear. They are not, unclear guidelines. And if a civil servant chose to blindly ignore these guidelines, we do think the PAC as a whole is a very, very serious violation of these government procedures and guidelines set down quite clearly in the stone. And of course, we are also very concerned about the documents presented to the panels, the Public Works Subcommittee, and also the Finance Committee of the Legislative Council to approve the expenditure on the civil aviation headquarters. And we would like to see in the future that these documents must be accurate, comprehensive, and not misleading, in order for legislators to give an informed and correct view to approve the expenditure. So that's why we have chosen these wordings and language in the report.
Give you a summary. It's two major areas. First is the area of violations of government regulations. Only secretary or permanent secretary of grade 8 that they are allowed to have a private toilet, and the director of civil aviation is not in that category. And he purposely built one for himself. That is a violation. And secondly, using the 1,500 square meters of future space reserved for expansion up to until 2025. He put it into today's use. That's also a violation. Having two violations, although it costs money too, and that is for value for money. So violation of regulations, and thirdly, that he has been actually warned by the Department of Procurement.
Estate.
Logistic, by the Department of Logistics, that he shouldn't do things like this. And they did it against the advice of another government department, pari passu his position. So that's a lot of violation. And then the next aspect is on the issue of governance. The issue of governance that he have to report such matters to his supervisors on this extra expenditure, although they have asked for $1 billion, but that $1 billion need not to be spent on items outside the scope that they have come in for approval and being approved by the FC. So it's a change of actions that have violated the standard and regulation. And thirdly, this is even to go on to another more severe, not severe, more important, a higher level between the cooperation between the legislature and the executive. They come in and ask for budget on a set of information detailed out what they need to do, how they want to do, and they ask for a budget. And on the basis of trust, the legislature under the FC approve it. But they have done beyond that. So it's a lot of number of questions that have raised up from this case. Okay? That's why we use the word deplorable.
係 TVB 嘅，想簡單問一問咧，其實報告入邊
TVB. The report says that the PAC doesn't accept that it's done without knowledge of the Civil Aviation Director General. Do you think that he's trying to shirk his responsibility, or is he lying? From the statements, oral statements, and also written statements, we found that it's impossible that this is all done. This was done without the Director General's knowledge. This 1,500 square meters and also the toilets and shower facilities are set out clearly in the employer's requirements. So how can he say that he didn't know about it? Does he have other responsibilities or liabilities as well? Has he breached the civil service code? But this is something that is not should not be dealt with at the PAC. Alan Leung. The Director General of Civil Aviation, after questioning him, he ultimately apologized to the public. Initially, he didn't admit responsibility and said that he was not aware of it, and he refused to apologize. But then, in our latest report, we have two major points. One is that for the 1,500 square meter space, it's a future provision, and now it's already been built. And also the toilet, shower facilities, and also the electronic and security equipment, the installation and procurement of those have been done without going through the proper procedures. And in the employer's requirements, those were clearly set out. It's impossible that the Director General was not aware of it, because they were in the employer's requirements. So in our report, we also condemned the director of RHSD, the Architectural Services Department, because the director of RHSD is also in a position to approve the employer's requirements. In our report, we said clearly that in the employer's requirements, they have to abide by number 990 financial circular to get the FSTB and the GPA's approval. And in our witness statement taking, they said that they didn't know And then the Director General of Civil Aviation has set that out in the employer's requirements. And the Director of RHSD was not aware of it too, so he had to be held responsible too. The same goes for 1,500 square meters. Well, in the finance paper submitted to the FC, that place should be a future provision and should not be built now. But then it seems that the RHSD director was turning a blind eye to it. Why are we so concerned about the situation for all government departments? In the use of construction floor area and the procurement of furniture and equipment, the same set of control mechanism applies. If the director of RHSD has not been abiding by the regulations in discharging his responsibility, and then it means that the internal control mechanism of a government department will collapse, and the consequence can be very dire. The chairman said that the executive arm should be accountable to the legislature, and this is something of great importance to us. And there is a discrepancy between the what is set out in the approved document and what has been actually. Then it's a great problem, and it also has a problem with in terms of accountability. The present RHSD director is not the one referred to in the report. So let's be fair on that. So we just use the name of the department. Thank you very much.